That was how I imagined being a writer was like. Writing was like coffee, candles. You sit down and there is this whole chapter of stories just flowing out from my little fingers. Too bad it was never the case. Hello, welcome back to my channel. The reason I want to do today's video was because last week I had a horrible, traumatic time writing an article, which almost never happened. Usually I felt like home when I was writing. I felt really comfortable. Not saying I am an excellent writer. I most certainly am not yet. But usually I enjoy writing a lot, tremendously, but not last week. The subject of the article was a little bit out of my comfort zone, and I felt like I cannot control my pen, my keyboard. So this whole process, the miserable process, gave me the idea of doing a video about some of the books that I have read about writing. Are they useful? I mean, we have 3 books that we want to talk about today, and one of them is 600 pages, 500 pages. I think 600 pages. If you bought a book of 600 pages, you naturally would wonder, is this really going to help me? And I can give you the answer right away. Not necessarily. Because for me, I feel like writing is not a laboratory experiment. It's not a mathematic equation that you can simply put 2 and 2 together and get a clear 4. Sometimes an author can seem crazy if he or she doesn't play by the book, by the rules, but if you read his or her work, you could feel the natural talent spilling all over the pages. But that doesn't mean you don't need some sort of basic knowledge about storytelling, right? This is why we are starting with this book, this 600 pages big guy. And trust me, I have quite something to say about this book. The Anatomy of Story, 22 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller by author John Truby, who is a world-class screenwriter and a consultant for film industry. I bought this book about less than 2 years ago, I think. I bought it for a simple purpose. I was on my way to finishing my first novel, and I want to get some insights or some professional help about if my story can hold up, if it was solid enough. So I bought it. It's a brick. You can assault someone physically with it. Trust me, it kind of hurt. It's 600 pages, but it's not an academic work. I mean, if you remember your library time in college writing a literature review, it was not that miserable. It was easy to read, and the structures were very clear. It kind of relaxed. I mean, this book is not about rocket science or astrophysics. It's about stories and how to tell a story and how to tell a story in different ways. And that's my first impression of this book. It's clear, it's easy to understand, it's straight to the point. It was like a manual book about how to write a story. Truby built a system to dismantle a story. He put up some very practical tools and concepts to analyze your idea or to build up your story from a very basic concepts. For example, he had this 1-sentence high concept test. I'm paraphrasing here, but what he means was, can you summarize your story in 1 sentence that has all the fundamental conflicts and characters laying in your story? He thinks that a story has a minimum of 7 steps in its growth from beginning to the end. There's weakness and need, there's desire, there's opponent, there's a plan, a battle. There is self-revelation and new equilibrium. He believes that if your story has all these elements, and they are all coherently linked to each other, you could make the story that can pull the audience in. He also provides a lot of basic knowledge and concepts about storytelling in terms of different forms, such as how a short story would be different from a script for movies or TV series, how the character arc changes depending on the forms, how a scene should work for the plot, and how to construct a scene, what is symbol web, and how you can use it as a metaphor for your story to deliver a message. Which, under his analysis, you could see that almost all successful Hollywood films are following these rules. He created this workflow, that a whole process of storytelling, that if you have an idea, you can use this book as a test to see if your story is truly complete or if there is anything that you missed. If you are a movie fan, you will probably enjoy more, have more fun reading this book, because the author named a whole list of movies and analyzed them and tells you that what you could have learned from their story and their scripts, how each scene is linked with each other and altogether serving the purpose of telling a specific story. He mentioned Godfather, for example, a few times, and you can see how this story, this movie, although very long, the scene and plot structure was very well organized and developed. He used graphics and samples to prove his point, which I found incredibly lucid. So in terms of the techniques of storytelling, this book is absolutely useful. Yes, it's like a mechanical manual. It's the book that I think a lot of students will read in the first semester of their creative writing bachelor degree. But then I have a slight problem of this book. You could say I am arrogant or over emotional or stupid. It's okay. Sometimes I felt this about myself as well. But a small part of me think everything felt too clear, too logical, too conformist in terms of being creative. You remember my favorite cartoon, Powerpuff Girls? There was sugar and spice and everything nice, and there is this X factor. Where is this factor? Does it? Sometimes we want to think outside the box in terms of creating something, right? So they are great advice, yes, but not necessarily advices that we all have to follow, maybe. I questioned this book a little bit, knowing that yes, it's great, it's a helpful book. I think it might lack a little bit sparks, because when you put everything down in a step-by-step way, creating an entire world of literature suddenly became baking a sourdough. Not saying it's bad. Baking a sourdough or anything bakery is super fun, but I don't know, where's the joy of creating, of going wild, going blind? Is it me? Am I being too cynical for drawing this conclusion? But that was my honest opinion about this book. It's practical, but it won't make you slap your thigh from excitement when reading it, or using it, I should say. I think you should view this book, you could view this book as a very solid, concrete, insightful step one. But the story, the journey, absolutely does not end here, which is the entire opposite of the next book I want to share today. I have briefly talked about this book in a previous video, saying how much I love it. Stephen King, On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft. I read this book in one night and one full day. Can't put it down, cannot put it down. I took numerous notes while reading this book. The book starts with King's personal history, personal life story, how he grew up, how he got so many rejection letters from the magazines and publishers, that one day, because he pinned all these letters onto a wall, and one day this wall almost fell down because it's too heavy. How was his college life, the moment that he was told Carrie, his debut novel, was sold, and how he and his wife were crying in their living room from joyfulness. If you have read King's books in the past, you would know that he writes in such a simple yet powerful way. He can easily drag you into his world. So, other than being extremely funny and humble, and it was enjoyable to read, he also provided a lot of useful insights about writing. He once said that the size of your vocabulary does not matter. What matters was how you use each word. He had this principle, his rule, that the word count of your second draft should be 10% less than the first draft, meaning you have to cut some like 10% words to make it leaner, more clear, and up to the point. You should put your first draft away for a while, go do something else, before you come back and start to edit it. He doesn't believe in carrying a notebook, which is something I found the most interesting, because if you think about authors, many of them just walk around carrying a notebook and write everything down. He doesn't believe that, because he thinks the only thing worth writing down is the idea that stick into your head. Without putting it on paper, you still remember it. It's still taunting you. That's the idea you should write down. You have to, if you forget about it, it must not be special enough. So you need to let it sink in your mind while you do something else, and the best idea will surface out of your mind naturally. And you have to listen to the characters, because sometimes they have their own beliefs or opinions that it's not yours and doesn't suit you, and you cannot block them. You have to respect them. You were merely a bridge between your characters and your readers. He had a wonderful idea that when you write your first draft, when you sit down by the desk, it's just you, a blank page, and your pen. You cannot let anyone or anything else come in between you and the pages. It's your world and your world only. Because the moment you sit down, the moment you decided that I want to write a story, you made a commitment to yourself and to the story, and you have to finish it. But when it gets to the second draft, this is getting more exciting. You have to open the door, you have to let all your friends, your loved ones in. You need to let them give you their opinions, and you need to evaluate them. Now, all of these things I just said was purely from my memory of this book that I have read at least a year and a half ago. And certainly I don't have photographic memory, but I think it showed how great the book was and how incredibly helpful I found it. But I think the best part about this book was not how many rules or how many process that he mentioned. The best part about this book was how empowering it is for its readers. For someone like me who dreamed about being a writer one day, King wrote in an inspiring way. He was extremely honest about his struggles, his failures, things he absolutely hates about in literature. And he even mentioned that there were some author's work or some stories that he wrote and he thought it was absolutely garbage. He was like this adventurer who had been to these amazing places and went back and telling you that, you know what, as long as you're writing, as long as you keep writing, you keep going, and this is something you truly desire, and if you put all the work in, you keep going, you will get there as well. One day, you will see the amazing views that he had seen. He wasn't educating you, because obviously no one wants to lecture from an old white guy now. But he was encouraging everyone with his personal story of how he thinks writing is the most important thing for him in his life. This book was absolutely honest, straightforward, and genuine. And I think it moves me. It makes me feel like he was genuinely share something that he believes in with me. He thought writing was a way to fight back the darkness in life, to voice up for human beings, to imagine another way of living. All this combined, I found this book so heartwarming because he was actually making his points, showing his attitudes, and letting people know that he's not a genius. Well, he is, of course, because he is so brilliantly creative, but he wanted to tell us that writing is a journey that he keeps on going. Writing is a process that, even for the great Steve King, it's still painful, but it's also wonderful. That despite all the pain, the suffering is absolutely worth it. Then comes the final book we are discussing today. To say it's a book is a little bit exaggeration. I think I prefer to say it was a pamphlet. It's a book I kept on my desk for about a year till now. I like to grab it anytime I could and read just one page and put it back down again. Being a writer, advice, musings, essays, and experiences from the world's greatest authors by Travis Alberoth and Helen Gordon. In the back of this book, you can see how many authors they quoted, which it was all the great names. It was like a who's who in terms of literature. It's not a full-length book. Each page contains one quote or paragraph of quotes from one author about a specific subject. It has different sections, such as finding your voices, methods and means, how do you cope with failure, searching for the right words, and the sense of the ending, how to craft, and the first draft, the second draft, all that things. First of all, it was amazingly funny. You can read about how so many great authors have an honest and brutal opinion about their life and their work. You could say opinions about them and their writing. Some of them were hilarious. Some said you just have to read and read and read, then you will know if you wrote garbage. If it was garbage, just throw it out from the window. And some said, do not let your cat in the room when you were writing, because the cat will most certainly distract you. Some said, do not mess with your spouse if you want to have a clear head to work. Some said, I only wrote in the morning. Some said, I cannot function until late at night. A lot of authors here talked about how you have to live a life first before you pick up a pen and starting to craft something. Some of them talked about their work process, how they start their day, how many pages do they write every day, how do they deal with negative comments or rejections from the publishers. It's always interesting to peek on authors as a group who are all suffering, but somehow manage to turn their miserable life into something gold. And no matter who you are, you can be a world-class bestseller, you can win the Nobel Prize, but they still found same thing in life, struggling, having difficulties to crafting sentences, finding themes, finding meanings of life, or dealing with their publishers or managers or spouse or their pets. I keep this book on my desk, and every day before I go to work, I pick it up and glance a page because it feels like a friend, all these friends having their opinions and who was just like babbling in your ears, who was staying with me, be there for me, and they've all been through the same things, which makes them together as a group. And it was very comforting knowing that all these authors, these great writers, have the same struggles. I think it's more like an emotional support book, if such a thing exists. And that's all for today's video. I had fun doing this one. I hope you do too. We are ending here because I am late for a party. I think, yeah, I'm late for a party. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? So I'm going. See you next week.